This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host today on this Thursday edition of the show. I am your host, Josh Strickland, on this 2020 show. The deuces are wild. We got 2020 vision going on, and I'm sorry that I just said that. I hated myself as soon as it came out of my mouth. But February's almost over, which is insane. We're already in the thick of it. We're in the end of the month of February, which is just crazy to think about. And since it's the end of February, we're going to be talking about more NBA as the NBA season starts to pick up after the All-Star break. We're going to be talking about the NBA All-Star break predictions, what we can expect teams to do. We're also going to talk about the NFL free agency, as free agency is going to start heating up in a little bit as it starts in a month. We're going to get some updates going on there. Then we'll talk about NCAA, maybe having new transfer rules, especially for the transfer waiver. Then we'll talk about the big fight. It's happening Saturday night, Wilder Fury Part 2. Then we have an interesting story about fan-controlled football that I'll get more in-depth later. But first, we're going to talk about John Beilein parting ways with the Cleveland Cavaliers after not even a full season. So if you don't know, John Beilein left Michigan last summer to sign with the Cavaliers. He spent 40 years coaching various levels of college basketball. He was actually pretty successful at Michigan, pretty successful at everywhere else he went. He was a pretty successful college basketball coach. So it was an interesting thing that when he left Michigan to jump up to the NBA, especially after 40 years coaching college basketball. So people were wondering how would he transition to the NBA, how he would deal with that, and clearly it didn't work out very well. He originally signed a 4-year deal with a team option for a fifth, worth about $4 million to $4.5 million per year. So it's about average for NBA coaches. And there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of locker room issues under Beilein. And I'm not sure if it's just because he just didn't know how to connect with these players that are not collegiate athletes, or there's just nothing he did work, or is it just the Cleveland Cavaliers being kind of a Cleveland team and just being not a very well-run franchise? I mean, any of those things could be correct, obviously, because we all know about the Cleveland Browns. We all know about the Cleveland Cavaliers, the ownership without LeBron James. The Cleveland Cavaliers, for the most part, over the past 20 or so years, is nothing when LeBron James is not there. They were terrible before LeBron got there originally. They were terrible after he left for Miami. And now they're terrible again after he left for a second time to go to Los Angeles. The Cleveland Cavaliers, without LeBron James, is a terrible franchise. They were a terrible franchise with LeBron James. It's just the fact that LeBron James kind of willed them to victory up there in Cleveland. So, is this Beilein's fault? Is any of it his fault? Well, he didn't do himself any favors. He had a slip. He had a team-only meeting calling players thugs. Later clarified that he meant to say slugs, which I don't know how well that went for the players there. He had no answers to fix all the continuous on-court issues involving Tristan Thompson yelling at Beilein during a broadcast when they were playing the San Antonio Spurs. Then, of course, you have the Kevin Love saga that's going on up there. But most of that anger is mostly directed towards the general manager, Kobe Altman. But he wasn't happy with the play on the court or how some rotations were being done either. So it's really interesting. This whole thing is really interesting to kind of see evolve. It's kind of embarrassing for the Cavaliers, which, I mean, at this point they should be used to it. But, I mean, it is the city of Cleveland. No offense to Cleveland, of course. But, I mean, you got to admit, your sports franchises are not the best. The Cleveland Indians do a pretty good job. Maybe you should just change the head coaching name to manager, and maybe that'll work. Because it seems like head coaches do not work out for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Or any Cleveland team in general. This is like they've had a lot of coaches in the past couple of years. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's a lot. So players weren't happy with how Beilein coached the team. They specifically mentioned his focus on fundamentals. They specifically mentioned lengthy film sessions, and they've mentioned lack of offensive versatility. So focus on fundamentals. That obviously comes from his 40 plus years of being a college basketball coach, where fundamentals are king in college basketball, where in the NBA they're not as much. NBA is a lot about more athleticism and defensive schemes and stuff like that. There's a little fundamentals, but I mean, if you focus too much on fundamentals, then I can see how that's an issue. Lengthy film sessions, that's probably another thing that he brought from college. I'm pretty sure college, when you have 3 or 4 days between games, most of the time you have a lot of time to watch film. In the NBA, you're playing 3 times a week, sometimes back-to-back nights. Actually, probably more than that. So lengthy film sessions does not work, especially with grown men that know what they're doing and they've played the other people that they've been playing for the longest time. I can see that, and offensive versatility, lack of it, that's a big deal in the NBA. You can't be in the NBA now without some offensive versatility, as you could see from literally any team. Like, name a successful team right now in the NBA. They have offensive versatility. They have a center that can shoot threes. They have a driving point guard. They have shooting guards that can do. They have wings that can do whatever you need them to. Versatility, offensive versatility is the main thing. So basically, this brings me around to who's in the wrong here. Who's at fault here? Is John Beilein in the wrong here for quitting and leaving, or are the Cavaliers in the wrong here for kind of hiring him in the first place? So that's an interesting concept. I think he was a good hire at first. He's a very successful basketball coach. Emphasis on basketball. He's never coached in the NBA, though. It's obvious he couldn't make the transition. The transition from college to the NBA is always a big jump. That's why people were kind of worried about Zion Williamson before he stepped foot on the court. But, I mean, obviously those criticisms are quelled now. But it happens for coaches, too. I mean, you've had plenty of coaches go from the collegiate ranks and getting into the NBA and doing pretty well. You had Billy Donovan, and you had the guy up in Boston that I can't think of his name, Brad Stevens. You had Brad Stevens in Boston. So it's a jump, but it is doable. And he's been coaching for 40 years, various different levels of college basketball. He's had plenty of transitions. He's had more transitions than all of us combined, going from one level to another level. But going from college to NBA is the biggest transition, and it is very difficult to make that transition, especially if you're not prepared for it, if you're not prepared for the tempers that happen in a NBA locker room. For instance, with Tristan Thompson, and also it's not his fault that Kevin Love's angry at the GM, so that doesn't help at all. So he was kind of put in a bad spot. He's a great basketball coach, but I feel like he was put in the worst possible spot for someone who's just jumping into the NBA, where you had a lot of I don't want to say divas. You have a lot of guys who are not happy with the situation they're in, which that's more of an organizational issue. And this is not going to get fixed with the new head coach. Speaking of the new head coach, they are expected to promote associate head coach J.B. Bickerstaff This would be, I do have the number. This would be the Cavs' 6th coach in the past 7 seasons. Bickerstaff was a head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies for 2 years. His father is also a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers organization as a senior basketball advisor. But J.B. Bickerstaff has a decent resume. He's apparently been an interim coach for like 5 different teams. He's been on teams where the coaches got fired and he just took their place. So don't hire J.B. Bickerstaff if you are a head coach that could potentially be on the hot seat. Just saying. It seems to not work out. But he is going into his 5th time being an interim basketball coach or something like that, which is crazy to me. It's crazy. He's kind of the luckiest coach in the NBA at that point. So when we return from break, we'll be talking about the NBA All-Star break predictions. I will be since the All-Star break is now over, I will be discussing who I think are going to make the playoffs, who could win MVP, stuff like that, when we return.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
The All-Star break is over. It's over. Now we get to talk about the good stuff. The good stuff. We have 30 or so games left in the NBA season. The season's winding down. We're getting into the tight races for the playoffs coming here soon, and it's going to be a good one to watch. So who are the teams that are definitely going to make the playoffs at this point? And the obviously anything can happen. They could go on a 30-game losing streak, which doesn't seem very likely, but it could happen. It's plausible. And then they couldn't miss the playoffs because of that. But these are the teams that I'm pretty sure that they're going to make it unless something catastrophic happens. So first off, we'll start with the Eastern Conference. The Milwaukee Bucks are easily the team to beat over there. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo and the rest of the guys on that team. They have been demolishing the league so far this year. They're 46-8. They're 25-3 at home, 21-5 away. So they are unstoppable at home. They're still unstoppable away. I mean, Giannis is making a great argument to win the MVP. And yeah, I mean, so their last game was February 12th. They lost to the Indiana Pacers, 118-111. The Pacers are kind of back in things right now, but they were on a 5-game win streak before they lost that, and then they lost to the Nuggets, who's another playoff team, and then they've been on win streaks galore. They were on a huge win streak from November to December. They didn't lose for a whole month, pretty much. So the Milwaukee Bucks definitely up there. Toronto Raptors, kind of a surprise to everybody. They're not as much of a lock as the Milwaukee Bucks, but they're the number 2 team in the Eastern Conference at the moment. They are a complete surprise. Nobody expected them to do this well, especially without Kawhi Leonard. But Pascal Siakam helped them out big time over there as he is helping them out. He leads the team in points per game with 23.5. Kyle Lowry leads in assists, as you would expect. The Raptors, we've explained this before when it was said that they might get their president poached. They're in the middle of the pack in points. They're in the middle of the pack in pretty much every category right now, but they are winning games and they are second in the East currently. Next up, we have the Boston Celtics, which with Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum doing some work. Jason Tatum leads the team with 22.4 points per game. Then you have Gordon Hayward playing a little better. Kemba Walker, of course, is a big boost to that team. But they've gotten better as the season has gone on. So there you go. And then those are the only three teams in the East that I guarantee a playoff spot. The other teams, the Heat, the 76ers, and the Pacers all have good shots at making it in. The Heat have been really good with Jimmy Butler so far. The 76ers have been, there's been some locker room chatter that's kind of been detrimental to them at the moment, but they're still playing pretty well. They are in a 3-game win streak currently. They are 5-5 in the last 10. They are 25-2 at home, which is really good, but they're 9-19 away. Then the Pacers just got Oladipo back. So they can only get better from now on, in my opinion. They are not as good as everybody else, but that's why they're in this scenario. But after them, it's a huge drop off. After them, you have the Brooklyn Nets. It's kind of iffy. You got the Magic. You have teams that could potentially make it in. You have the Wizards. Wizards is kind of a long shot. The Bulls, at this point, is kind of a long shot. The Eastern Conference is generally very top-heavy at the moment, as you have after 6, it's just meh. So the Magic and the Wizards, the Magic and the Nets currently right now are in place to make the playoffs, but I don't think, even if they do make it, they're going to get knocked out in the first round, first off, and they're not going to be very interesting to watch. So we'll see how that goes. We'll move on to the much more interesting Western Conference. You have the Los Angeles Lakers at number 1. These are going to be my teams that are a lock, and there's a lot more teams that have a lock for the playoffs in the Western Conference. I think there's about 5 that are definitely locks to make the playoffs at this moment in time. You have the Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They've kind of been complacent so far. They didn't really make any moves, didn't make any splash hires or splash moves at the trade deadline. They did. The Clippers kind of stole a lot of the players that the Lakers wanted. Some people have been saying the Lakers are going for more of a chemistry approach instead of just gathering all the best stars they can get. They are led by Anthony Davis with 26.6 points per game. LeBron James is averaging 11 assists per game. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has a 42% three percentage. And then Anthony Davis leads in every defensive category for the Lakers. They are a defensive team to beat. It's going to be very tough to beat them anywhere. But they are 18-7 at home, 23-5 away. They are 41-12. But like I said, they're in a much more difficult Western Conference over there. They're on a 3-game win streak right now, 7-3 in their last 10. We move on to the Denver Nuggets with Jokic. They are 38-17. They're 7-3 the past 10. Jokic leads with 20.6 points per game. Paul Millsap has a 44% three-point percentage, and Jokic leads pretty much every other category, rebounds and stuff like that. So Nuggets, pretty solid team. They had that huge trade with the Grizzlies and 3 other teams that kind of helped them with their depth. So we'll see how that helps them out as we continue on. Next up, we have the Clippers, the other Los Angeles team. You have Kawhi, you got Paul George, who has not played at all. Really, Paul George has not been healthy. Kawhi is taking his required day's vacation or whatever. So we have never really seen the full strength of these Clippers yet, but they are the 3rd team in the Western Conference, and they keep picking up better and better stars as we go along, as they made some moves at the trade deadline, and they also picked up Reggie Jackson from the Pistons. Kawhi Leonard leads the team with 27.2 points per game. Then after that, you have Lou Williams with assists. And then defense, you have Montrezl Harrell with leading blocks per game, but everything else is Kawhi Leonard. That team easily runs through Kawhi Leonard, and they're easily going to make the playoffs because Kawhi will not let them not. Next up, Utah Jazz. Utah Jazz are definitely going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. It's a little closer than the Western Conference, of course, but you have Rudy Gobert, you have Ingles, and they're doing pretty good. Donovan Mitchell has 24.3 points per game. I don't really have much else to say about the Jazz, other than they're doing a pretty good job right now. Then, kind of controversial. Not really that controversial, but I think the Rockets easily can make the playoffs. I feel like with their new small man lineup, they can win more games. I mentioned that before. With a small man lineup, they're going to win more games. They just need to get Russell Westbrook more space to work with, and I think he can put up huge points and win them a couple games. They are currently 6-4 in the past 10, and they are 19-8 home, 15-12 away. After that, it's kind of a drop-off. Not as big as a drop-off as the Eastern Conference, because as I said, the Western Conference is much stronger than the Eastern Conference. You have the Dallas Mavericks, 33-22. Then you have the Thunder, who are also 33-22. Then you have the Grizzlies. Grizzlies could sneak in, but then you have Portland right after them, and you have the Spurs, who you always got to watch out for. And then, of course, you have Zion and the Pelicans, who could potentially get into the playoff conversation. So the Western Conference, as usual, is the more interesting conference out of the two. As like I said, after the top six in the Eastern, it's kind of like, do I really want to see that team? Where in the Western, you have interesting teams. You have the Grizzlies, you got the Blazers with Dame Lillard, and you have the Spurs, who doesn't love Coach Pop. Then, of course, you have Zion Williamson and the Pelicans at 11. So there's an interesting race for the playoff spots there in the Western Conference, and we'll see how it all shakes out in the next 30 or so games. But that's how I feel right now. I think quick predictions. I think the Wizards will sneak in, and I think the Nets will probably stay. And then in the Western Conference, I think Portland will get in. Memphis will probably duck out. Pelicans will get close, but they won't make it. But then the Mavericks and the Thunder will stay in as well. So those are my predictions at this moment in time. So we'll see if they actually stay up to date. When we come back, we'll talk about NFL free agency. I got some updates for y'all when we return.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We have updates. Finally, stuff is happening in the NFL. There's been a lot of speculation, especially with the QB market being as big as it is this year. There's 11 different guys that could potentially do stuff that could help teams, could break teams if they don't re-sign and stuff like that. Of course, the big dog is Tom Brady, which he has not made any. He's not going to make a decision until free agency begins. But we do have another big dog that made a decision. We have Drew Brees. Drew Brees has decided to come back and play at least one more year. He's not going to retire yet, and he's already mentioned that he said he's either going to play for the Saints or he's going to retire. So we're assuming he's going to get a deal done with the Saints. Now, this, of course, is a great thing for the Saints because now they no longer have to make a decision between Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill, which is a decision apparently. They no longer have to pay Teddy Bridgewater. which I'm assuming Teddy Bridgewater is going to be asking for a decent amount of money for his services, especially since he went 5-0 in Drew Brees' absence in New Orleans. And then Taysom Hill. I'm just glad this is happening because now we can put to rest all these silly people talking about Taysom Hill being a franchise quarterback, which once again, I would just like everybody to remember, he's a 30-year-old gadget player who has thrown 12 total passes or something like that in the NFL. He wasn't even that good. I mean, he was pretty good with BYU. He had some great games at BYU, but he wasn't really known for his passing ability at BYU. So I'm just glad we can kind of put all that away. I'm glad Drew Brees came back just for that reason, because I was kind of getting sick and tired of people pretending that Taysom Hill could lead a team as a franchise quarterback, especially at 30 years old. I mean, yeah, especially with his abilities. I mean, no offense to him, but Taysom Hill's a fantastic athlete. He's a fantastic gadget player. He's a fantastic guy to have in your arsenal, but not a fantastic starting quarterback. I just don't see that happening at all. And like I mentioned after their playoff game against the Vikings, that he could be a viable option at starting quarterback, but that was more of a we need a bridge these guys. He needs to be a bridge. He can't be a franchise guy. I was suggesting that you give him a chance to start at quarterback, but if you have an option to get Drew Brees or get Teddy Bridgewater, then that's not, you shouldn't do that. But I'm glad we can put all that away. We can quell that, get that out of the way. So Drew Brees is returning in. It makes a lot of sense. The Saints are going to be a playoff contender as always. Drew Brees never really had any drop off statistic wise. So yeah, I mean Drew Brees, he's a great leader. He does have some issues in the playoffs recently, as the Saints offense seems to kind of come to a halt in the NFL playoffs. So we'll see how Sean Payton, we'll see how Drew Brees, if they do anything about that. But this seems like one of those times where it's kind of a make or break thing for Drew Brees. I feel like this might be his last year, especially if they win it all. If they win a Super Bowl, he is going off in the sunset, obviously, but we'll see what happens. The Saints will always be a top team in the NFC with Drew Brees around. Even when they were struggling for a couple years, kind of rebuilding a little bit, they're still a threat because Drew Brees is throwing 500 yards each game anyways. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see. Excited. I'm a Panthers fan, so I don't really like the Saints that much, but Drew Brees is an exciting guy to watch. And obviously, he's trying to keep his passing records away from Tom Brady, who's apparently going to play until he's 55 years old. But that is the first QB shoe to drop. That is the first one to drop. We were waiting on Drew Brees to make his decision because his decision affects Teddy Bridgewater. His decision affected Taysom Hill, but his decision mostly affected Teddy Bridgewater. So now Teddy Bridgewater is probably going to go somewhere else. So now teams can start kind of honing in on Teddy Bridgewater, seeing which teams could potentially take his services. You have the Indianapolis Colts, the Chicago Bears could be interested, the Miami Dolphins might be interested, the Raiders are probably interested as well. But like I said, I mean, it's still a little muddy there. The QB market is still a little muddy because you still have Phillip Rivers, you still have Tom Brady, you still got all these other guys like Ryan Tannehill and stuff like that, Marcus Mariota as well. You still have all these, and Jameis Winston, of course. You still have all these guys still available. But I think Teddy Bridgewater is probably kind of above Marcus Mariota and above Jameis Winston at this moment in time. Jameis Winston did repair his eyes, so maybe he'll be a big time player now, but we'll see. I could definitely see Teddy Bridgewater going to Tampa. That would be an interesting move. I could see him going to Tampa, replacing Jameis Winston, and we could see how that would go. I can actually see Marcus Mariota being a backup for Drew Brees. That would be an interesting development. But yeah, so we still have the waters are still muddy, but at least one domino has fallen, and we already know he's going to sign with the Saints. He's already mentioned that his Saints are bust. So there we go. The other free agent news is Greg Olsen going to the Seattle Seahawks. So he spent 9 years with the Carolina Panthers. He came out with 3 Pro Bowls, and he signed 1 year, $7 million contract, 5.5 guaranteed. And he chose Seattle over Buffalo and Washington. So he provides quality tight end depth at the tight end position. So Seattle currently has Will Dissly, who has been playing pretty well, but his big issue is he's been playing for 2 years, and he's had 2 season-ending injuries, one ACL, one Achilles, and those are kind of things that are hard to get back from, especially if you're a tight end where they're more of expected of you. You have to run routes, you have to block, and you got to do stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting how Seattle uses Greg Olsen here, because Greg Olsen's not a young man himself. He's 35 years old. He's had foot injuries. He's had foot surgeries all over the place. I'm pretty sure he's broken both of his feet at one point. So it's interesting. He passed up a deal with Fox. I mean, he's been broadcasting XFL games for Fox, and he's been doing a pretty good job at that. On bye weeks, he gets invited by Fox Sports to broadcast a random NFL game that he has no ties in, and he does that during his bye week. Like, everybody's on vacation and he's out broadcasting football games. So that's a more interesting development for me, that he kind of gave up being a broadcaster to be tight end for the Seahawks. So clearly he thinks the Seahawks have a chance at winning the Super Bowl next year, which they did this year. They need to improve that offensive line and give Russell Wilson a little bit more help. But Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league at this moment in time, and he just has no offensive line. He's running for his life every day. Greg Olsen's not really going to help with that, but it helps tight end depth. So if Will Dissly it doesn't come back and isn't as good as he was, or he's just not able to play to the potential that he has, they could throw in Greg Olsen, because Greg Olsen, he's still a viable player. He had a pretty decent year this past year with Kyle Allen at quarterback for most of the year. People need to remember, if you look through his stats, Greg Olsen's stats for the past 3 years or something like that, Cam Newton's been injured for most of those. Cam Newton was injured for most of the year last year. He was injured for most of the year before that. So a lot of Greg Olsen's stats are a little skewed negatively, because Cam Newton has not been around. And Cam Newton's favorite target is, of course, Greg Olsen. So you got to take some stuff with a grain of salt at this moment in time. So it's going to be interesting to see Seattle with Greg Olsen, see how they use him, how Carroll will use him. He's a really good tight end. He's on the older end once again, so he's more of a depth guy. He's not going to play every snap. He's not going to be a starter or anything like that. But I think this is a good sign. This is a quality sign by Seattle. And only $7 million. That's pretty good. And yeah, I mean, I'm sad to see him go as a Panthers fan. Sad to see him go. I love Greg Olsen, but you know, it has to happen since the Panthers seem to not want to win anymore. Well, anyways, when we return from the break, we'll be talking about the new NCAA transfer waiver rule that could potentially be in effect as early as next year.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
never-ending battle rages on, as you have the one group of people that obviously think that college athletes should be paid and should have more rights than they have right now. And then, of course, you have the group of people that think, no, they shouldn't have anything. They're students first and athletes second, so they should be treated like normal students. And then you have people in the middle, they're like, why can't we have both? Because normal students don't get some of these restrictions. And that's where we are now. Because if you are a normal student, hypothetically, if you are a normal student, you can go to a different college all 4 years of your undergrad, or 5 years, or 6 years. No judging here. You can go to a different university every single year of your undergrad, and then go to a different one for grad school. And there is no penalty. There's no academic penalty. You don't have to sit out for a year. You don't have to do any of that. But you know what you do have to do that? You have to do that if you're an NCAA athlete. So if you are an athlete, the current rule states if you are an athlete, then you would have to sit out a year if you transferred, unless you got a waiver, which is very difficult to get unless you're Justin Fields. Justin Fields got it pretty easily. But anyways, some players get it, some players don't. The NCAA seems to change their mind on who deserves it and who doesn't every year. So it's interesting to see the different strategies to try to get these waivers. So ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, they recently threw some support behind some transfer reform. And then a couple days later, the NCAA Transfer Working Group announced on Tuesday that it would explore a concept allowing out all athletes in all sports to transfer and play immediately one time during the course of their college careers. What a novel concept. So this would mean players would be able to move freely without penalty. This will allow all athletes, whether they're from basketball, football, baseball, soccer, tennis, swimming, or anything like that. It will allow all the athletes to have a one-time transfer exception, meaning they don't have to sit out, meaning they don't have to take any penalty. They can just they can go to a different school. So if you go to a school and it just isn't for you, like, this school's not for me, you can then transfer out, play for another team, and then you're good. That's it. You get to play immediately. A lot of issues happen when these guys have a legit reason, and then, of course, people bring in the fact that when the coaches leave, they should have these waivers so they can just transfer anywhere they want. When a coach they signed to and committed to leaves, they should be able to leave the program. I mean, some kids work like that. Some kids commit to the program. Some kids commit to the coach. It really depends. They want to give the athlete the option, and I like giving them options. The more options, the merrier. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to see that they're finally doing this. It's kind of a no-brainer in my opinion, but, it's the NCAA. It takes a while to get no-brainers, But the concept would change waiver criteria, allow approvals for first-time 4-year transfers in all sports to compete immediately if they receive a transfer release from their previous school. Now, this means the previous school has to allow it. Most schools will usually allow it. Some coaches won't allow it. For instance, if a player tries to go to a rival school or another school in the conference, the coach can, of course, veto that, and then that's just a whole thing right there. So they still have to get the transfer release from a previous school. So a school can tell you, no, you can't transfer. Something like that. They must leave their previous school academically eligible, which makes perfect sense. You should be good academically. Like, for instance, if you are a regular student and you try to transfer to another school, you should have the academic eligibility to transfer to another school, unless you're transferring for your academic ineligibility, then you're transferring to a school that has less standards, which I'm not calling any schools out, but just saying, happens. Also, they need to maintain their academic progress at the new school, making sure that they're still on track to graduate and stuff like that. And they must leave under no disciplinary suspension, which means they aren't in trouble. They're not transferring because they're in trouble. They're not transferring just because they got suspended for something and stuff like that. I like it. It's a good rule. It really is. These athletes should be able to move. I know some people have some issues, like especially with the millennials. Some people have issues with these athletes having choices for some reason, but sometimes it's just the basic part of it is just that he went to a school that he thought would be a fit, and it just wasn't a fit. It happens. I mean, it really does. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you thought you would have a good time, but you ended up not having a good time, so you went and did something else? That's basically what this is. I mean, college is a big decision to make. You're guaranteeing, depending on your worth as an athlete, but you're guaranteeing 3 to 5 years on a college campus. That's a lot to ask for. That's a big decision, and sometimes people make these decisions wrong. Or, for instance, they're the coach that convinced them to go there, and the only reason you stayed there for so long was because that coach was there. If that coach ups and leaves, then you should be able to transfer out. Now, I know here are some issues with this, of course, and these are always the issue. This is why these rules were put in place in the first place. So if a coach leaves, for instance, if Mel Tucker left Colorado for Michigan State, that means every player that he recruited at Colorado, which is not a lot, is like 20 or something like that, they can all now transfer to Michigan State with no penalty to go play for the coach that they committed to play for. Now, that completely depletes Colorado's depth. It kind of screws them over even more than they have already been screwed over by Mel Tucker. So you have issues like that. Is a coach taking players with him? For instance, when like a coach takes assistants with him, he could take players with him. He can convince players to, hey, I'm going to this school. If you go with me, you'll play there. I'll guarantee you playing time or something like that. So stuff like that can happen. It can easily turn into a crapshoot like that. It can turn into the Wild West. So we need to make sure that there are some rules involved in that. And like I'm not smart enough to make these rules. I am nowhere near smart enough to make these rules. I'm just noticing the issues. Some people mention that smaller schools could be poached, which you could argue that they already do that. They already get poached. So, for instance, if the MAC had, if Bowling Green, completely random example, I'm just using Bowling Green. If Bowling Green has a starting quarterback, 5-star, not 5-star, but they have a starting quarterback that was like a 2-star in high school, but he developed into this fantastic player, he could then transfer to a bigger school if he's promised to start right away, and then Bowling Green's kind of screwed right there out of a quarterback position. I mean, it's kind of the group of 5 version of, the way I look at it is kind of the group of 5 version of losing a quarterback to the NFL draft. That's kind of what it is. Because if you have a really good player, they're probably going to stay there for 2 or 3 years, and then they're going to jump ship to a bigger program if they don't think they're getting NFL prospects, NFL attention. However, I do see a lot more NFL players succeed out of smaller schools than larger schools. Now, of course, you have more people getting drafted, but some of the best players in the league are from these smaller schools. So that is also an interesting thing. I mean, a lot of group of 5 and FCS schools get draft picks as well, get people drafted as well. So, I mean, I think it's not necessarily where you are. I think it's mostly, I mean, if you're good enough, you'll get attention. That's basically what you could go to Texas, get all this media attention, get all the hype behind you, and you can become a top 5 pick because of that. But if you play for like South Carolina State, you can still have a chance at getting drafted if you're good enough. So small teams will get poached. Bigger schools, I think the bigger issue is going to be schools are going to have a depth issue because they're going to get poached. Their depth is going to get poached. Like, for instance, Clemson's Clemson's wide receiver core. Some of those guys who don't play as much, they could get poached to another big school and they can transfer without any penalty and play right away, and it could turn into a crapshoot. So I like the idea. I like the concept. We need to workshop it around a little bit more before we finalize it, but I like it in concept at the moment. When we come back, I will attempt to talk about boxing, but we have a big match coming up this Saturday, and I will talk about it next.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Some people have been saying that this is the revival of heavyweight boxing, and I tend to sort of agree just because I haven't heard this much hype over a heavyweight boxing match in a while. Through my experience, the most hype I've heard for a boxing match was McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather or Mayweather versus Pacquiao, and those are not heavyweight matchups. The heavyweight boxing has a completely different stigma. When you think heavyweight boxing, you think Mike Tyson, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You think Mike Tyson, you think of heavy hitting, you think knockouts and stuff like that. Whereas the boxing we've seen recently that's kind of reached the larger stage is more fighting for points, which is boxing in general nowadays. It's fighting to win the judge decision, less going for KOs and stuff like that. But heavyweight boxing has that stigma where you're looking for knockouts, you're looking for big hits, you're looking for just two huge guys beating each other up. So in their first matchup 14 months ago, they had a draw. And in their highly publicized rematch of the MGM Grand, they're both trying. Deontay Wilder and Tyson-Fury are both trying to achieve a full-blown heavyweight renaissance, trying to return the heavyweight class to the rightful place as the weight class that drives global interest in the sport of boxing, generates comparisons to the glory days. So Wilder-Fury 2 is trending toward to become the highest-grossing heavyweight fight in U.S. history. It will be offered as a joint pay-per-view by both Fox and ESPN, which is a big deal. So, yeah. They're going to try to be as good as Lewis Evander Holyfield rematch in 1999, which set a Nevada Livegate record of 16.86 million. Then, of course, you had the Mike Tyson-Lennox Lewis fight in Memphis, Tennessee in 2002 that had a U.S. Livegate record of 17.5 million. The promoters are, of course, hoping this breaks these records. It's the biggest fight in the last 50 years in the heavyweight division, according to Fury. He pronounced to a crowd of 1,000 at the resort's lobby Tuesday. He said it could be the fight of the century. Could be the new fight of the century. We'll see. There's a lot of hype going around here, and I'm gonna tune in. I will tune in. I don't know. I'll tune in, but I'm not very interested in boxing. I've mentioned this before when I talked about UFC. I'm not very interested in these combat. I like boxing a little bit more than MMA, but I understand there's some strategy to boxing and stuff like that. But there's a lot of hype going into this, and I'm going to be honest. I'm not familiar with either of these guys. because I don't watch boxing regularly, but I know Wilder, Tyson-Fury was in WWE for a little bit for some reason. He signed like a contract or something. I don't know. But Fox and ESPN are both highly touting this match. They are hyping this match up. They are expecting large payouts. They're expecting a lot of people and a lot of eyes to be on this match. So Wilder, he's 42-0-1. That one, of course, being the draw against Fury the first time. He has 41 KOs, so he's KO'd everyone he's faced except for Fury and one other person. He's in his 5th year as the heavyweight champion. He's making his 11th title defense and quieting many who criticize his skill. The first Fury fight proved the competitive equity between the pair, and each man has tended fiercely to inadequacies that surface in that bout. So Fury shown up far fitter, promising increased power, while claiming he'll knock his opponent out in the second round. Wilder has been diligent about polishing power combinations and will finish Fury after twice decking him the first time. Well, there you go. So this could lead into a match against Anthony Joshua, who has regained his 3 belts from Andy Ruiz Jr., which in December. So there's now a heightened possibility that the 3 elites can stage a round robin of sorts, similar to what Ali, Frazier, and George Foreman did in the 1970s. So we have 3 boxers right now, 3 that are hoping to bring the heavyweight division back up. I've seen Anthony Joshua I've seen Anthony Joshua fight. He had that one loss to Ruiz, which was a great story, actually, because everybody was just like, how did this guy beat him? But that's interesting. So Fury's co-promoter says that the loser of the Wilder Fury has a right to invoke a rematch clause. So there's more than likely going to be a third match between Wilder and Fury, especially if the payout is that big. And then the winner of that third match, the winner of the series, I guess, will go on to face Anthony Joshua in another huge boxing matchup. It's very clear that all these guys want to go back to the days of Ali, Frazier, Foreman, and they want to find out who's best. They want to find out which one of these 3 men are the best boxer. And so, I mean, it's exciting. It's always exciting to see stuff like this develop. I personally don't really care about boxing, but if you tell me these 3 guys are 3 of the best boxers of all time, I'm probably going to tune in and watch. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I was listening to the radio this morning, and I kept being told that that Wilder and Fury could easily be greats of the sport. They can be the greatest of all time in boxing. They're up there at least with Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, and stuff like that. And that gets me interested. That makes me interested, because if they're that big of a deal, I want to at least watch them. So if they turn out to be that big of a deal, I can tell people that, yeah, I watched them live. I watched that all happen. I watched all that happen, and it was a great time, and it was a lot of fun. So I want to be able to watch it. And I didn't see the first one. I haven't seen the first match. I heard it was really good, but I haven't seen it. And boxing has been kind of dying recently. You had Floyd Mayweather, who was undefeated. He was a big draw just because he wouldn't shut up. People wanted to watch him lose. Then you had Manny Pacquiao, who was really good at what he did, but he still lost to Floyd Mayweather. And now he's like a senator or something. But I mean, just saying, Floyd Mayweather is the last big name in boxing that everybody knows of. And these guys are trying to get into that mix. Deontay Wilder, Tyson-Fury, they're trying to get in that mix. By the way, Tyson-Fury is a fantastic name for a boxer. But I've heard a lot about Wilder. I've seen some of Wilder's antics, and he seems entertaining. He's got 41 knockouts, which is what people want to see. Everyone wants to see the heavyweights knock out. That is the big thing about Floyd Mayweather that I couldn't. That was another thing I couldn't get into Floyd Mayweather, because I'm not saying he couldn't knock people out, but he very rarely knocked people out. He just kind of tit and tat until he won. So I'm interested. I'm bought in. Let me know if you're bought in here. I will watch it. I will watch it at 1 o'clock in the morning or whenever it's going to be on, because God, I hate these big. I love and hate these big matches. I understand they have to have a whole card and they got to have other fights to kind of warm the crowd up and stuff like that. But by the time the fight that I actually care about comes on, I'm just tired. I've been watching boxing. I've been watching other guys fight for like 3 hours at this point. Can we just get to it? I mean, I can't really complain because I watch wrestling. I watch WWE and WrestleMania, and all their stuff is exactly the same like that. But still, I'm just saying, can we just get on with it? Let's do it. Let's first match of the night. Do it. Guarantee it. Just do it. Everybody's still going to pay. Everybody's still going to buy it. I know some people who don't buy it until the match itself comes on. So just do it first. Just tell everybody, hey, this is the first match. First match. Now, the crowd there is probably not going to enjoy that because they paid all that money just for that one match, and then they might leave. Who knows? When we return from the break, after I just fumbled myself through talking about boxing, we will be talking about an interesting new football league, not the XFL.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Everyone wants to make their own football league at this point. So this is a story by Patrick Ruby of the Washington Post magazine. I found this story on one of the newsletters that I'm subscribed to for Front Office Sports, and it's an interesting concept. They're looking to debut in early summer of 2020. That's this year. That's in a couple months. So it is called the Fan-Controlled Football League. And I want to talk about this because it's just an interesting concept in general, and I think it's a fun thing to talk about. It's just fun to talk about these different leagues and stuff like that, just to kind of learn about them. And it's just generally nice to know that stuff like this exists, because you could either be interested in it or you can just be like, huh, that's cool. I just like cool things like that. I like trivia like that. So the Fan-Controlled Football League. It's apparently a thing. It's a thing. It's scheduled to debut early summer of 2020 in Las Vegas. It's going to be teams playing 7-on-7 inside a customized arena attached to a casino. The league combines the all-American habit of democratic self-determination with the Silicon Valley ethos of an app for everything. That's exactly from the article, if you couldn't tell. So, the chief operating officer is Andy Dolich. He's 72 years old. He's been a former executive with multiple sports franchises, including the San Francisco 49ers and the Washington Capitals. So the founders of the FCFL, which is the Fan-Controlled Football League, come from tech backgrounds. They're guys that have created apps, guys who have started tech companies on their own. They've created apps. They've created companies that make apps for phones and stuff. And they are in charge of this. So this idea originally came about where they were like, let's buy. They got the idea from another guy who bought an indoor football league team. This is a venture called Project Franchise. They started in summer 2015. They bought a team in the Indoor Football League, which costs like $100,000 to buy a team. The Indoor Football League is like an 8-on-8. They play on 50-yard fields. After they bought the team, they put up a public vote. The first public vote. The public vote was to ask which city the team should play in. And this is a fan vote. They let anybody vote. There was no registration. Anybody can vote. I don't know if they had like multiple choice where like you just pick for 4 options, or is a write-in vote. But they had people vote without signing up, without registering anything, and they can vote for whatever they want. So 10,000 votes were cast in this poll, and Salt Lake City won. So they put the team in Salt Lake City. Then they put up another poll for the team's nickname. And it was write-in. You can write in a nickname and people can vote for it. So they had 36,000 votes to decide the team's nickname. They had the Screaming Eagles beat out the Stormin' Mormons, which is a fantastic name, and Teamy McTeamface, which is a internet meme. So, I mean, that alone is cool. You can choose your team. I can see that being a thing maybe every year. Choose your team's nickname. What do you want the nickname to be this year? You can name it after a player. Like, for instance, if you have a team that has a player that carries everybody on the back, you know, you see the memes, the fighting Drew Brees, the fighting Tom Brady's, the fighting Cam Newton's, the fighting Chris McCaffrey's, something like that. You could name the team that every single year. You have a 1-star player, name the team after him. Why not? So fans also picked the coach. Fans decided the rosters. They decided the starting lineups. They even decided the cheerleaders. They're on the field. So their concept is to make it fully fan-controlled. The fans vote for everything. The fans voted for the coach, where they had online interviews where everyone could download the interview footage and review it and vote on who they want. They had them deciding rosters and lineups and stuff like that. They decided cheerleaders based off pictures, I guess. I don't know. They even had a scandal where one cheerleader voted for herself 1,000 times. And they found out because she used the same IP address of her house all 1,000 times. So she voted for herself 1,000 times and then got caught. They even voted to add chili dogs to the concessions. They also picked songs for warm-ups. So then, during the game, they had the opportunity to choose plays. They had like a Tecmo Bowl style layout where there's 6 plays and you can choose which play you want to choose, and the fans voted for a play, and if that play won, then they ran the play. So they had kind of a big disaster the first time when they first. This is all from this article. If you want way more information about it, read this article. It's in the Washington Post magazine. But they had it malfunctioned at first. Like the Wi-Fi messed up. So the coach actually had to call the very first play of this new venture. He had to call the very first play, and apparently they fumbled and it got returned for a touchdown for the other team. But then the first play called by actual fans was a deep pass thrown for a touchdown. So there you go. The Screaming Eagles unfortunately finished 5-11. But more about the actual fan-controlled football league. So it will base its teams in one city only. Las Vegas. They will only play in one location. They will play in Las Vegas. Every team will play in Las Vegas. They will play in the same location. Teams will also share position coaches. They'll share doctors and trainers. They'll share marketing staff. And they'll even share a practice squad, kind of like Team 9 for the XFL. Games, so fan voting will be gamified as well. If you call a play that got a 15-yard gain, then you will get 15 yards on your profile. And I mean, I think that's a good idea as well. I mean, get people more invested in it, and then people could actually bet with their friends. Like, for instance, I can definitely see myself and my friend making bets. Like, I'll be on this team, you choose for that team, and let's see who wins. See if we pick correctly. They said that the games will be an hour long. 7 players per side on a 50-yard field. There will be no extra points. Instead of extra points, they're going to have the fans vote for a wide receiver and vote for a defensive back that will go one-on-one against each other to determine the extra point. That is all voted by fans, of course. They are also thinking about having weekly contests in which fans can win their teams an extra timeout or an insurance 5th down. It's an interesting concept. I mean, people have already bought into it. Here are 3 franchise owners, include Mike Tyson, Marshawn Lynch, and Richard Sherman. Now, of course, there are issues about whether or not your team can get sabotaged. They didn't really go into that very much in the article, but they mentioned that there's no punting plays or anything like that, so you can't just vote for a punt on every down. So they pretty much they have a generic lineup of plays that you can choose and everybody can vote on them depending on the situation and stuff like that. And probably the same way for defense. They share all coaches because they don't really need to they don't need those coaches. So yeah, it's fun. I like it. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch. I think it'll be a lot of fun to play. Like I said, I could definitely see myself and my friends just saying, hey, I'll be this team, you be that team, and let's see who wins. I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun. So, yeah. Tell me, let me know how you think. I'm sorry about that. I got distracted by reading a little bit more information about it, but it's fun. It looks fun. It looks like a good time. And thank you for listening, everybody. This has been the GSMC Sports Podcast. You can let me know what you think about the fan-controlled football league, or what you think about my terrible boxing expertise, or let me know what you think about the NBA All-Star break predictions. You can let me know at Strickland_Josh. You can also follow the GSMC Sports Podcast on Twitter with GSMC_sports. Then, yeah. Thank you for listening, everybody. Sorry for the weird pauses. I don't know what's up with me today. Thank you for listening, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. I hope you have a great 2020 day. I'm so sorry. 20th of every month, baby. It's 2020 day. Have a 2020 day, everybody.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.